Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to a special edition of Unfair and Unbalanced, a podcast with myself and Roy Snell, the CEO of the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics. In this podcast, Roy and I take a wide-ranging look at the history of the Compliance and Ethics Institute, how it has grown to become one of the top compliance conferences annually. He talks about this year's conference in Las Vegas, some of the keynote speakers and other highlights, but he particularly focuses on the non-learning tracks and what you can do at the conference to really further yourself in the compliance space, if you're a vendor, your compliance service, or your product, and generally utilize the conference as a mechanism to not only jumpstart your compliance practice or your service offering, but also drive it forward to 2018. It's a fascinating discussion, something I've wanted to do with Roy for quite some time, and I hope you will enjoy it. This is Tom Fox. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Unfair and Unbalanced. Hello, everyone. Tom Fox again, and I am pleased to have back my good friend and colleague, Roy Snell, the CEO of the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics, and we're here to talk about the upcoming 2017 Compliance and Ethics Institute, which will be held October 15 to 18 at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. Roy, welcome back.
Good to be here, Tom. I love talking to you, man.
So, Roy, I thought we might take this opportunity to really get some of your reflections on the CEI, Compliance and Ethics Institute. How you've seen it grown, what you've seen work, what people have really, members rather, have really responded to. I've been going, I think this will be I think I started in 2010, so I'm not quite sure what number that will be for me, but it's grown, and I think this year it will be even larger than last year, which was our largest event. So I just really wanted to explore it with you, talk about it with you, and really hope members or others who hear this podcast will be intrigued enough to sign up and come join us. So with that, why don't you tell us how the CEI started?
Well, actually, that's a story not a lot of people know. Before we started SCCE, we did, I believe, for 2 years in a row, a thing in Redmond, Washington, which was kind of had a little different title, something about corporate social responsibility, which was an odd decision now that we look back. And after we started SCCE, we changed it to the Compliance and Ethics Institute. It was interesting in the early days. It was pretty hard to find the expertise. It took a couple of years for us to build a network of the right folks. And as some people have heard me yammer on about, we don't pick people based on how much money they have or how big their title is or how big their organization is. We pick them on what they know. And frankly, to be perfectly honest, it's a little harder because it's easy to find big names. It's harder to find people that know something intimately and can teach it well. Einstein, I believe, said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't know it well enough. Well, those are the people we look for. And so that was one of the challenges in the first few years. It happened to us in Europe, too, when we started that about 5 years ago. And we now have a good base of people to pick from who we know or know certain subject matter. And then every year we experiment with about 30 to 40% of the speakers are folks who hadn't spoken in the recent past for us. And so we constantly get new ideas and these sort of things. But the early days were pretty harrowing. You know, they're small conference, a lot of extra work because of our lack of experience at the time. It's fast forward today, it's just great to have such a huge group of people to seek out and ask for their help in teaching at this conference. And then because of the attendance, it's gone up to, I think last year we had 1,800. We get a half a dozen or more tracks, and that allows us to have more topics and give more people more opportunities. And so I think this year we're about 90 ahead of last year, so we'll probably be bigger unless something strange happens. And that's kind of one of the other things I focus on a lot is I just always want to see growth so that we have the ability to have more tracks, more speakers, more topics, more resources to help people with. And so a lot of work in the 6 months beforehand, and then you go and have a great event. It's kind of fun, particularly when it's over.
So, Roy, one of the things that I think people new to the profession find challenging is, and I saw this with some clients who attended last year for the first time, and frankly, it happened to me in 2010, is just being overwhelmed by the size of the conference, the number of people, the number of tracks. If someone's going to be a first-timer or a newcomer, how would you suggest that they kind of dip their toe in the water?
Well, I think that one of the things that they can do is take a whole bunch of time planning before they get there to make sure that they wind their way through these tracks. I think there's actually 9 of them on Sunday, and then on Monday and Tuesday there's closer. Now there's about 12, I believe, with the advanced discussion groups, and just kind of wind their way through that properly. I would scope out the facility beforehand. I would go register the minute I get to the hotel. There are hours that it's open, so you got to be careful of that. But I wouldn't want to be in all these lines and whatnot, and try and get a lay of the land. But I'll tell you what we have that we're very fortunate to have is Samantha Graves has done an article on LinkedIn. We've taken her text about what newcomers should do and put it into a video. So if someone goes online and searches on Samantha Graves' name and SCCE, they will find this thing. And let me get, maybe you know how to spell Samantha's name.
Yep, I'll actually link to those in the show notes, Roy.
That'd be great. It's Greves. And so she has kind of a 8 or 9 point thing she does both in writing, and we got somebody to do a avatar kind of a video. It's not her voice, but it's her material. And she talks about things like still bringing a business card, or a bunch of them, because you really want to make that moment of sharing information as quick as possible. And although most of us will go back and then connect on LinkedIn or something, is do that. She also says, get your LinkedIn profile up to date. If you don't have one, you ought to get it, even if you're not into social media. And just some other simple tips that folks new to this would benefit from. So I would suggest going there. And here's one other bizarre tip. The biggest thing I remember from walking into a large conference for the first time when I first got started in my career was this sense of, I don't know anybody, and a lot of these people know each other, and that's a little uncomfortable. one of the things that we try and do to help get conversations started is they get a tag called first time attendee, to the dark green if I remember correctly, and people will on occasion kind of welcome you in by noticing that tag, glad to see you're here, how's it going? But another idea that we've done is Sunday night we have what's called the tailgate reception, in which we're encouraging everyone to wear a jersey of any kind. And, you know, it's a little awkward, I'm sure, for some. A lot of people don't do it, but a bunch of people will throw a jersey on over their shirt, and it is an amazing conversation starter. You see a jersey from a place you've lived or a team you root for, or more enjoyably, an arch rival, and it is the easiest conversation starter there is. So I know this is going to sound odd, but the number one thing I would do if I was going to this conference for the first time is I would bring a jersey, throw it on, go to that reception on Sunday night, and it's going to go from kind of awkward and new to more conversations than you can imagine. It just, some reason, people and their sports teams just love to talk. And so, and frankly, you know, Tom, the overwhelming other thing I can't do much about is if you sit in sessions for 6-7 hours a day, your brain is going to be fried. And just from any amount of material for 7 hours would be tough. But particularly if you're looking at it and going, oh my gosh, this is stuff I'm not doing. I got to do all this stuff. It's overwhelming. One of the nice things about the tailgate party is it encourages conversations that aren't compliance related, which is what people need at that moment. And one last thing, Tom, is I would say to new folks, every one of us has walked in and felt overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that people are doing, but you're not yet. It isn't a question of whether you're doing everything. It is the question is, are you making progress? And everybody's making progress, and they should relax a little bit. And what you take away from this isn't the fact that there's 20 things that you haven't done that people talked about, is which one of the 20 are you going to go back and start with? And that's all you can do. And I would encourage people to try to fight the tendency to feel overwhelmed by the amount of stuff they haven't quite got to yet. Everybody in that room has had that experience, or is having it at the same time as you are. And there isn't a single person at this conference that doesn't get what you do. Enjoy that. You're going to go from an environment where a lot of people don't get what you do to 3 or 4 days of everybody getting what you do. And I would lean that way as opposed to being overwhelmed. I'm with my people. They get what I do. They understand the challenges I have. They can give me ideas. Things are going to get better. Not overnight, but they're going to get better, and that's all you can ask for.
So, Roy, one of the things that I found interesting is the events that are really before and after the main part of the conference. Obviously, after the conference, you have the certification exam. But on the Sunday before the conference starts, there are some really deep dive, not seminars, but kind of 3-hour breakout sessions. But there's also speed networking and speed mentoring. And I found those two events to actually be incredibly useful for someone like myself who's been in the profession for quite some time, and for, you know, maybe the the lesser experienced. Why don't you talk about how you came up with those and maybe how they've evolved?
How I forgot to mention those. That's why I enjoy doing this with you, Tom. Is you like few other people understand what we're doing. We work our tail off to try to help people connect. We feel that networking is as important as education. We want to help people get that phone number or 2 or 5 that people can call when they're in the midst of a little bit of chaos, when they need the advice most. And one of the things that we do, of probably many, and I'm just not thinking of them all, if I could forget networking, speed networking and speed mentoring, I've obviously forgotten other things. But basically, someone called us a few years ago, or one of my staff found it, is just some entrepreneur said, look, I'm going to take this speed dating thing where people sit at a table for 20 minutes and meet somebody, and then over the course of an hour and a half, you meet like 6 people or whatever. And I'm going to apply it to networking at a conference. So we hired the firm. The same guy's been doing it forever. He comes in, 60 or 70 people will register in the speed networking. It's basically all peers, and you just meet 5 or 6 people over 20 minutes each, exchange cards, information, get to know them. And then speed mentoring is even a smarter idea, because basically we get the mentors and the mentees in the room, and they get to meet each other. Now, here's the thing. I've been told for 21 years we got to do some mentoring thing, and I've watched other associations do this. They will pair 2 people up quite often randomly, maybe with similar industries or some other determining factor. But the odds of those 2 people hitting it off for a 5-year regular conversation experience are very slim, because the real factor isn't what industry you're in or what level you're at, but really, do you connect? Does the person who's mentoring connect with the person who's being mentored, and vice versa? And you can't, the odds of getting it right by just throwing 2 people together is very slim. What's not slim is when you sit down, much like the speed networking, you do the speed mentoring, and you meet 5 or 6 possible mentors. Now, we don't sit down and talk about possible. The people meet and talk. And 1 or 2, maybe 3 of the people connect for a long-term relationship. But it's just so much smarter than this. I've never seen anything else that worked. Usually 2 people are slapped together with not much thought. It doesn't work, and people are dissatisfied. And in this case, odds are 1 out of 5 or 6 you're going to connect with and talk to on a regular basis for years. And we have it at a few of our national conferences, and we have it every year at this conference. So some people will do it 2 or 3 times, end up meeting more like 10, 15 people. And the trick really isn't complicated, is people just have to be able to connect personally, or the thing just isn't going to work. So both these are great. Both are ways to meet more people. And for those listening who have been around a little longer, we're always looking for more mentors. So call the office or get online and figure out how to join the mentor group. I get a lot of people asking me how they can help. Well, you want to help? This is one thing you could do, is sign up to be a mentor. So that stuff before the conference is really helpful.
So, Roy, let me kind of flip it a little bit now to the more practiced compliance practitioner, the more senior, the more mature,
Yeah.
someone in the industry 5, 10 years, something like that, and they come with the goal of, I want to see what's new, what's innovative, what are who's got some innovations that I might be able to take back to my compliance program. It's been my observation that many of the vendors who attend and support the event will actually announce innovations or have innovations to come out publicly to coincide around the CEI. How would someone really utilize the vendor room if they're a more seasoned practitioner and looking for that from vendors?
You know, there are a lot of associations who put the vendors at the back of the bus. We treat everybody equally. One of the problems that they cause when they treat vendors like subservient, you're lucky to be here, you got to give me money to be here, you know your place and all that. That's one of the most negative side effects of all that is they're basically telling everybody that these folks are lesser people. And it's just ridiculous. It's another constituency that's a part of every profession. And this constituency happens to have solutions to your problems. So I would take some time at every conference to hit a couple of booths at every break, at every reception and everything. Maybe go through the list of vendors that are listed in the brochure and pick some out to target the areas that you might have some upcoming need for. These people basically pool the money from dozens, if not hundreds, of compliance professionals by charging the money, create something that all of them can use, and it costs everybody 1/200th of the cost if they were to do it themselves. I hope that makes sense. It's a little odd observation, but they hire the best and brightest from our field. They have experiences from multiple clients that they incorporate in their products or services. So they're more aware of best practices than most people who don't travel every day, if you know what I mean. So
Sure.
The vendors are such a great asset, and I am glad you asked. And quite often to begin the conference, I'll say, look, folks, you have an obligation to your organization to be aware of the tools that could help automate or make more effective things that you're going to do down the road. You have an obligation to your company who paid you to come here to go visit with these folks and be aware of the tools that are available to you. And I couldn't feel more strongly about this. I just think that, and most associations don't help. They put these folks at the back of the bus and treat them like second-class citizens, not in our organization. In fact, we are also going to go beyond that to say you really owe it to yourself and your organization to be aware of what's available.
So I'd like to end up with maybe your thoughts on this year's keynote speakers. As always, we have just a fabulous group of keynote speakers. We've got 4. We've got Marjorie Doyle, who's going to talk about the life and ethics of a compliance professional. We've got Eugene Soltis, who's going to talk about his book, Inside the Mind of a White-Collar Criminal. We have Mark Latiman, who's going to talk about, I assume it's cybersecurity, as he's a computer forensic expert. And then Liz Wiseman is going to talk to us about leadership and multipliers, about how the best leaders really help an entire organization. I was wondering if you might just kind of give us a little snippet preview, and if any of the topics are really exciting to you right now, what are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm going to just run down a comment or two about each one of them. First of all, Marjorie Doyle's been in the compliance field since dirt. She started at DuPont. She did a short a couple of years at a company called Betco, big international oil and gas, I believe. Hope I got that right. She now does some independent consulting and primarily works with boards. But Marjorie teaches at our academies. We try to make sure that at every academy, one of the general session speakers is a stone cold killer compliance professional who can relate to everybody in the room and speak about the profession, the role of the compliance officer, the function of the compliance program, like people who can't do it, haven't done 15, 20 years in the business. And she also happens to be one of the most uplifting, positive people around. So where people might be feeling a little overwhelmed by all the information and all the things that everybody's telling them they should be doing, that they don't have the resources to get to everything, Marjorie somehow makes everybody feel better. Mark Lanterman happens to be a local a guy here in Minnesota that I know pretty well. He is an excellent speaker, very personable, can connect with people, and has been, he's one of those guys who has been involved in some of the biggest cyber crime situations from the consulting help out after the disaster side. He has had such great experience, he can't tell you about most of them. I mean, he might, lessons learned, these sorts of things, but he can't mention them. He's really a very experienced. And here's the key difference with Mark. Mark has been speaking and interacting with the compliance world for a long time. He gets everybody in the room and knows what they do. One of the problems we have as compliance professionals are now picking up responsibility more and more for IT security, privacy, and such, is that there's this world of brilliant minds in IT security, and there's a world of brilliant minds in compliance, but there aren't too many people that have spent enough time with both to speak as well as Mark. And so we're very excited about that. Sadly, his topic is very, very important. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there. Of course, you know, not many people hear about because these things are just not discussed for obvious reasons. Eugene Soltis is really fascinating. He has done research unlike anybody else into the mind of white-collar criminals. And what's fascinating about him, he's online, there's some videos of him talking. He's one of those people you get the impression right away doesn't have a dog in the fight. He's not there to prove that all people are bad, and he's not there to defend all people that did bad. This guy, in my opinion, is a stone-cold researcher in this subject area, and he talked to some people for years before writing a book, I believe, on the topic, or speaking. Now he's certainly speaking on it. Guys like Bernie Madoff and many of the other most famous ones, I don't know how he did it, but he got access to so many of these people. And again, I cannot stress this enough. Most people that speak on this subject are out to prove that all leaders are bad, or they're out to prove that the government is overreacting. And true to the compliance world that doesn't pick sides, just gathers all data, good and bad, and brings it forward to leadership so they can make a good decision, Eugene has pulled all the data he can find, and he just makes observations on the good and bad things he finds, and presents all the information without bias. And Liz is just very good, best-selling author, an advisor to executives, and she's talking about leadership. And the reason why this is important is that we have had a strange 20 years, depending on how you count how long compliance has been around. In the early days, people for compliance jobs weren't necessarily picked based on a lot of previous experience. It was their first compliance officer, didn't necessarily know who to get. They were also put in the organization somewhere down the ladder far enough that they had a difficult time being effective. And now, since Wells Fargo, Penn State, and a whole bunch of other players have proven this role is so important that they want to tuck them up higher in the organization, maybe at the C-suite level. Well, a whole lot of people with regulatory and ethics and compliance experience who find themselves in these roles have a couple of challenges. One is they may not have had a ton of experience in leadership. They may not have had a ton of experience working with leadership. And so we want to help the attendees study leadership a little bit more so that their interactions with the higher level folks in their organization, including the board, is a little bit easier for them down the road. I think we got a great lineup. Couldn't be more biased. I drink all the Kool-Aid and such, but we try very hard to get diversity. In this case, a veteran in the compliance world, cybersecurity, white-collar criminal expert, and a leadership expert. I think our committee picks more practical, substantive topics and the right people than anybody. These people are giving you some real down-to-earth, practical, common sense advice. They don't just come in and talk at 65,000 feet and say everybody's bad and we all got to work harder at this. We already know that. What we want to know is how to do it. And these folks can help us with that.
Well, Roy, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time, but I've been visiting with Roy Snell, the CEO of the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics, and we've been exploring the Society's Compliance and Ethics Institute, which will be held in Las Vegas this year, October 15 to 18. Roy, as always, thanks. We're going to link to the registration information for the conference and also Samantha's article and video, so people will have a chance to maybe take a little bit longer look, and hopefully they will join you and me. We have really just touched on many of the things that happen at the event, and it's a fabulous event, and if you're in the compliance profession, this is the event for you in 2017. So, Roy, with that, many thanks.
Thank you, Tom. I enjoyed it. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this.
Hello, everyone. Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of Unfair and Unbalanced. I have linked in the show notes to registration information for this year's Society of Corporate and Compliance and Ethics Institute. If you haven't signed up, I would urge you to do so. It is truly one of the top compliance-related events of the year. Also, hotel rooms are running out fast, but there's still a few available at the Las Vegas Caesars Palace. This is Tom Fox again. Thank you very much for listening to this episode, and I hope you will join me for another podcast episode on the Compliance Podcast Network.